Hello, my name's Trevor from SUSE, and I'm here with my good friend Heinrich from BCX.
Thanks for having me, Trevor.
And what we'd like to do is discuss a really interesting solution engagement in Africa with one of Heinrich's customers. And it's led to Heinrich building a solution template that allows them to run Kubernetes environments across dual sites. And, we're talking about a banking customer here with rather strict regulations. And so, I think you'll find this really interesting. So let's move on to the agenda.
Sure thing, Trevor. Let's move on.
So as you can see, we're going to talk through some quick introductions and of BCX, myself and the customer. And then Heinrich is going to spend some time talking about the customer requirements, BCX's technology blueprint, and then we'll have a quick summary at the end. So can you move on?
Sure thing, Trevor.
Heinrich.
Thanks for having me, Trevor, and welcome everyone to SUSECON. We're excited to be part of the presentation teams. Very exciting to be part of it. And like I said, from BCX Namibia's side as a partner, we've been doing a great journey with SUSE and this customer. So we are very happy to have the opportunity to present. BCX Namibia was founded in 1998. We've got offices in our capital city, Windhoek, here in Namibia, and Swakopmund, our coastal region. We're about just over 120 employees, and we are the largest ICT supplier in Namibia. Okay, we focus on verticals like mining, energy, especially on financial services, as you'll soon see, and the public sector. All right, over to you, Trevor. Oh, it's the next slide's me. Okay, everybody. So a little bit more about me. My name is Heinrich. I'm a solutions architect, and I focus on a lot of new technologies, cloud native space being a passion of mine, and very excited to be working with the SUSE team on this project. It was a fantastic journey. And yeah, that's me in a nutshell. Love cloud native, love DevOps, love automation, RPA, all those kinds of technologies, and delved my hands in it for quite a few years. Over to you, Trevor.
Thank you. So my name's Trevor Kelly. I'm the pre-sales manager, and I've got teams in the UK and South Africa. Currently on a road trip, so I've been to Johannesburg, Cape Town, and here at the moment in Windhoek in Namibia with Heinrich. And looking forward to discussing this solution with you.
Excellent. Thank you, Trevor, for having us. Okay.
So I'll spend a couple of minutes talking about the African bank that are involved. We're not allowed to mention the name, but it gives you a really good idea of the sort of solution and customer that we're talking about here. This is an international bank operating in 4 countries. As you can see, they've got a number of banking and financial services that they run. Around about, greater than 2,000 permanent employees. And actually, I think they've, from a Namibian perspective, they've got about 30% market share in country. And so, there's how many? We've got 1 million customers there. And as you can see on the right-hand side, Heinrich's been working with them for about 5 years, very much a trusted advisor. Of course, I trust Heinrich as well.
Yes, I trust you as well, Trevor.
And, I think the important thing from the bank's perspective is they're very much focused on IT innovation. And, the cloud native applications allows them to drive that IT innovation. And clearly they need a very robust infrastructure solution to run these new applications, these new cloud native applications. So we'll move on and talk about the customer requirements. Over to you, Heinrich.
Thanks, Trevor. Thanks again. So an interesting customer, rather large footprint for here in Africa, a fantastic team to work with, and quite complex requirements. So we have some challenges from our banking regulators here in Namibia. And we'll talk a little bit about the why now. So obviously the focus journey is about application innovation, decentralizing, going from monolithic to containerized microservices. And there's a big focus on the space. One of the products that the bank is really looking is the streaming service from Apache Kafka. So they're really looking at a robust infrastructure. We've got some limitations about core banking solutions having to remain on premise. So it is a hybrid solution that we've constructed with the SUSE team, looking both at the agility and scalability of the cloud, looking at the multi-country approach, looking at the fact that we have got VMware, which is a trusted solution on premise, which we installed the solution on through vCenter directly. Multiple sites, of course, we've got a primary and we had our secondary or DR site as well. and the solution's actually being stretched around that. And they've got different environments, like with following the good old-fashioned software development lifecycle. The bank has got a UAT training, staging, and multiple production environments, primary being secondary as well for high availability. And the developer's environment and cluster is running in AKS in Azure, which is still fairly new here in country. I think it's great to see our banks moving in that direction. And because it's development, we don't have a concern about the regulation restrictions. There's no live data, no customer data. It'll just be the developer team. That's why they chose Azure and then the Microsoft platform as well. And in combination with BCX ourselves, helping to implement, and SUSE, a fantastic team from SUSE that's been walking the journey with us. And for the web application part and the concerns around network security, the customer preferred using F5, which obviously, as you know, if you know Nginx, you know F5. So obviously using a two-tier topology was a very interesting part of the design, which we'll be discussing in a moment. And for the simplicity of the management plane of Kubernetes and all the downstream clusters, we're answer by far one out. The comparison we had with the client, and it's just been a wonderful experience. I think the teams are all very excited during the journey, and the customer is fairly happy with the Rancher product itself.
So can I ask a question,
Sure.
Heinrich, in terms of Azure? Obviously, Africa's a big continent, and you and the customer have chosen Azure. What do you find do you have any latency issues with Azure, or does that work fine?
So one of our biggest challenges in Africa is obviously having redundancy in some of our core services.
Yep.
Internet redundancy, having power redundancy. Even most of our countries have a single power provider. So a lot of concerns around latency. Yes, we managed to do that with giving the best of both worlds. So what we did in the Azure cluster is we had availability zones that we set up through Rancher very quickly. Okay. We could pick a secondary zone in West Europe just in case bad things do happen. As you know, outages are possible. They do happen, especially in Africa. No, I'm just kidding. It doesn't happen often, but we are ready for it. It's part of the high availability design is to have that extra availability zone. We picked 2.
Okay, sounds good.
Right.
Should we move on?
We shall move on. Okay, this is me again. I'm going to take this one. So we mentioned regulatory requirements, guys, and obviously, governance standards and constitutional laws in country. We do have 2 specific constitutional law bids about not moving customer-facing or banking transactional information outside of our country. So that was a very big consideration during our design, obviously focusing a little bit more on premise for the bank, especially when it comes to their production systems, hence having not only a dual site for high availability, but having a hybrid configuration. Still trying to look at the scalability of cloud, but obviously focusing on on-premise first. And then about sovereignty and residency, guys, it is by a local banking regulatory team, the Bank of Namibia team. We do need to consider the fact that the data itself has to be resident in country, but also the sovereignty, the law that applies to the data. Thus, that requirement was made fairly clear. Then we've got some privacy laws to consider because our customer has got a portfolio in multiple countries. So we had and a fairly big portfolio internationally. We had to look at things like GDPR. So privacy is, of course, very important. Laws such as POPI in South Africa, which has just recently come into effect. These are also considerations that obviously took form and shape in the design discussions. Then we had PCI DSS. Everybody knows 4.0 is out now, and it's only 12 controls, but any network admin or any IT administrator that has to secure up the bank based on the payment card industry standard is set with a few challenges. So we really took this consideration very seriously, and as part of our solution, it's not mentioned on the slides, we even implemented new vector. Very good. That's something to mention with the recent acquisition. We're happy to share that. It's a fantastic product. Let's continue. Okay, so infrastructure requirements. So we spoke about the customer's infrastructure and obviously being a banking country. There's a big focus on existing technologies. We didn't want to disrupt too much with what they had. And they had existing partnerships with F5. They had existing partnerships with VMware and with Azure Cloud. So it seemed like the good fit to bring these technologies together and to bear in the solution design. Obviously, being a bank, we need to look at privacy. So a private container registry was suggested. And obviously, everything was hosted on premise in terms of that. The sizing considerations, we had a lot of, as they're starting down this journey, we had a lot of challenges about getting the right size. because we don't yet have all the solutions that will be going onto the platform at that point in time. So there was quite a lot of consideration, discussions about, we looked at some of the persistent storage needs through Kafka that would be a requirement. We looked at some of the microservices applications we do have currently available, and that helped us come to this node sizing decision. We wanted to support as many of the nodes as we could. So we obviously decided around 2 vCPUs, 8 gigs of RAM. The Rancher node clusters were a bit more heavyweight. We wanted to make sure that they could obviously carry all the downstream clusters on the same architectures as well. So there was node pools being created for high availability with templates for downstream that was handcrafted by the SUSE team during the implementation.
So, sorry, when you mean templates for downstream, you mean templates for deploying Kubernetes
into the
downstream?
vCenter, yes, under the VMware. So we actually had customized templates designed so that the team could persist and use these templates very frequently should they need a new node to come up and try and automate the process.
And that provisions the VMs in VMware as well. So,
directly through the vCenter integration. Yes, it does. So guys, and obviously high availability is always a big concern for any customer-facing service industry like banking. High availability is a must-have. So based on that, we spoke with the F5 team, and they have got the big IP solution as well as the Nginx ingress controllers. And we looked at a two-tier topology, and we'll get into more detail on that later. I'm just going to give you the high cliff notes for now. And obviously, layer 4 load balancing had to happen between the nodes and with health checks and reporting back into a SIEM and source solution for the bank. And then we had 11.7 SSL termination at the WAF level on the big IPs for the nodes. Okay. So we had 3 nodes with K8 roles in, obviously, etcd, control plane, and worker running in each side of the vCenter node templates. Then for disaster recovery, initially it was proposed with S3 backups, and then we discovered halfway through the process there that the storage level, we didn't have that capability. So we actually created a very interesting solution there around using SIF shares, which is not a common practice, but it was something different. And it actually did manage through Rancher to obviously manage the cluster level backups. And then also the customer has a relationship with Veeam, and they're looking at Kasten for a long-term strategy to obviously manage the restore of the backups on the cluster level. All right. So guys, around the blueprint technology, right? So driving, I already explained in a bit of detail, but we'll take you through the design rationale around the networking first.
It looks like you spent quite a lot of time on the networking side.
We did with the F5 team and with the SUSE team. We did go through very many decisions on the designs. One of the most important ones is which CNI were we going to use. So we looked at all the tables, as you can see there on the slide. We compared the requirements from the bank, and obviously one of the biggest requirements, as any PCI industry leader does know, is having encryption of data. Wherever the data flows, guys, we need, if it's card data, it needs to be encrypted. So we eventually came to a best practice scenario. We discussed all the options, and Calico won out. So no preference here. It was just based on the customer requirement. Calico was the best choice to choose in this design because it spoke to the customer's main requirements. All right.
And that's what the diagram on the bottom left is your...
Just indicates, we sort of compared them line by line. I mean, you can find this anywhere. It's pretty much common knowledge for those of us who work in cloud native, but definitely Calico had the most green across the board, if we can put it simply. And it won out in terms of the CNI decision when we came to the design. Now, the two-tier topology we were talking about for the network design, because we had a big IP load balancer on level 4 that load balances not only the Rancher side, the Rancher cluster, but the nodes themselves between the Rancher interface and where to the cloud APIs talk. That was the first tier, is load balancing that with a big IP. The second tier was the application traffic, going not only through the big IP, but then hitting the ingress controllers on each of the downstream clusters, and then load balancing between those nodes. We created ingress classes with the team from SUSE and F5, and we pulled these ingress classes during deployment level. So when an application is deployed, the ingress class would already be deployed. It was node port deployment. It was not a daemon set deployment, so it was as a service deployment. And on that, we could apply network policy for security reasons and best practices. but we also had the redundancy that comes in from having multiple ingress controllers deployed into each node.
Yeah, brilliant.
Let's go on. Right, so this is just a nice high-level diagram. Diagrams say 1,000 words, so I think it's very prompt to obviously have the SUSE's design team, sharing this with us on the slides today. The decision rationale was fairly clear around all the requirements team. So we had a primary site for vCenter for VMware. We had a secondary site. The Rancher management cluster would then control and manage all of the downstream. And we had an active passive design in terms of the production and secondary production. And then the staging. And I see a small spelling mistake there. Sorry for that, Trevor. I see it's stagging. Must be a staggering cluster. No, we're just kidding. Sorry for that. But then we have the training and UAT cluster as well, and the development cluster being hosted in a hybrid fashion all the way in Azure. There we've got our own redundancies as well, like I mentioned, the availability zones to be sure the developer team can work, I hope, day and night.
So a question I've got here is
Sure.
in terms of a previous slide, you talked about the scalability. How many downstream clusters are you starting with initially?
So initially, we're actually creating the entire environment because they've got a plan structure where we have an idea of what microservices will be running.
Yep.
So we do need these to fit their development lifecycle and their DevOps strategy as a company. So we pre-created with primary production, secondary production, staging, training, UAT, as well as development from the get-go.
Okay. Yeah.
And as part of this, there's integration to Azure DevOps tooling, which means they can set this up for their CI/CD pipelines and actually use any of these clusters in the stages where they're meant to be used for.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, on the New Vector side, because New Vector consists of 3 different modes, if the audience is not aware, it's got a monitor mode, learns a lot, and it's got learning mode, monitor mode, and then obviously enforcement mode. So because it's such a great solution for pods running inside of clusters in Kubernetes, we basically assigned, very simply, we leave the developers to do their thing. We don't do too much hardening there, but we did start already at staging environment. We put the learning mode on.
Okay. Yeah.
And then at the next environment, which was UAT, we put the monitor mode on to just continuously check the traffic during the tests to make sure that those microservices are pretty hardened up, thanks to New Vector. And then the last, obviously, in production, we have the enforcement mode, where we block off any foreign traffic.
Yeah.
Using that a good old DPI inspection they've got there.
So that sounds good.
Right.
So it looks like you've got plenty of headroom.
We do.
Yeah.
We do. We're proud of this.
Yes.
It was hard work, so it was great to implement with the team. And then they've got a second design for a second bank they have. So as we mentioned, it's a big bank. They've got multi-country solutions. And we did a bit of a minification, which means we just took the design and tried to fit it into what we had available in the infrastructure at the neighboring country site. We didn't give them access to Azure right now because most of the development is done at the main bank.
Yeah.
So it just makes things easy as well. We sort of focus the costing at the main center that can bring in the main funding. Also not affecting budget too much, but we also gave them their own primary and secondary production as well as their Rancher management clusters so that team can take responsibility. It's so easy to do through Rancher to manage your Kubernetes clusters. They can access their role-based access control with Active Directory was implemented. And then obviously we gave them the 3 primary clusters for downstream that they required, which was obviously UAT and primary and secondary production.
And would you have a separate registry in each country for?
So for latency issues, currently there is a registry in the cloud that's private, so a private registry running through Azure.
Yeah.
And both parties can access that registry.
Okay. Yeah.
So that was the cloud-hosted register part. All right, we're at the summary already. My goodness, this goes quickly. I see we're doing well for time.
Yep.
I'm proud of us. Well done. Audience, we hope we're not boring you too much. This was exciting for us. We're very passionate about this. Trevor, it's wonderful to have you here. The customer, the SUSE team, I want to thank you guys. An amazing job working with these gentlemen and ladies from SUSE. And let's go ahead and do the summary together. You first.
Okay. So, as you can see from the slide, that Heinrich and the consulting team from SUSE have been working very closely with the customer, and I think it's the customer would agree that we've exceeded their expectations, and clearly there's a lot of security and compliance requirements that we needed to work towards as well, and the customer is delighted with the solution.
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
And you're actually still in the middle of implementing or close to the end.
Close to the end. We have go live in about 5 days.
Okay.
That's around the corner, but everything's been going fantastic. We have the main site done. We're busy with the secondary site, which is a lot less complicated.
Yep.
So we envision to be spot on time and ready to go live, carrying those workloads on the Kubernetes clusters.
And I think the really important piece here, and one of the reasons that I was very interested in this, is that you've created a repeatable template.
Correct.
That you want to take to other customers in the financial industry and the other verticals that you support as well.
Exactly. And the brilliant thing about the design is because we took the privacy laws, the considerations around regulatory requirements, we took the agile lifecycle, software development lifecycle at its core to the business. We are ready to repeat the same solution for many of our other customers in the FSI space. We have great relationships with our local banks and some of the other neighboring countries we operate in as well, and we are going to be very excited to bring the solution to them as well.
Well, the other thing is that we've been to see a customer this morning, and they're again moving more to a cloud native model.
Exactly.
Exactly the same sort of idea. And again, when they put these applications in production, they're going to need that robust and resilient infrastructure.
Exactly.
And you've got the template ready to go.
We've got the template ready to go, and thanks to SUSE, the management afterwards is just as simplified with Rancher.
Brilliant.
All right.
Well, thank you very much, Heinrich. I really appreciate you spending the time with us today to talk through your solution.
Thank you for visiting us in person, nonetheless, in Africa. Welcome.
Thank you very much,
Thank you very much, Trevor, for our recording. Everyone, enjoy SUSECON.